Hi, welcome. My name is Andrew Gilbert, Charlie Hunter. This is part of the Freight's sort of ongoing series of conversations that taking place before gigs with sort of select artists. So, yeah, select artists, Charlie, yeah. So, Charlie, I thought we'd start, being that you're a hometown boy, and people often associate...
So we start with... Is that right?
Exactly.
Oh, sorry. I never get to have a microphone, so I like to do that whenever I go.
Be ready to cut them off, all right? When I give You graduated from Berkeley High, and I think a lot of people assume that you were part of that vaunted Berkeley High jazz program, but that's not, in fact, the case.
I tried, but I wasn't good. I was like the third string guy. There was a guy named David Markowitz who was really good. And then my friend Eric Dinwiddie was the second guy. And then I tried out, and they were just like, I don't think so. No.
But it was something you wanted to do.
Well, I didn't really want to do it. Eric Dinwiddie was like, man, you should try to do this because then we don't have to sneak into the music room anymore to play the instruments. Then you can just do it, you know. But definitely the jazz, I mean, people talk about like the Berkeley High Jazz Band, but I mean, in the early 80s, mid 80s, we, the people who weren't in the jazz band, maybe it was because we were jealous or because, you know, who knows, but we were just like, those guys are nerds, you know. And we were just talking about that today, like, you know, Dave Ellis and George Redman and all Ben Ball and all the guys that were the heaviest hitters are just like, those guys are the jazz nerds. They had clothes that were inappropriate for the era.
Yes. So it was a club that wouldn't have you as a member, and you didn't necessarily want to be a...
Well, I don't know if it's that, because everyone would play with everyone else. Yeah. Just like everyone would, you know, you'd have a specific crowd you'd hang out with, but it would always blend into somebody else's crowd or something. At least that's how my experience was. I don't know what it's like now. Yeah. You know, they still have music?
Oh, they're keeping it alive. They're managing. Yeah. There are actually some great players still coming out. Some of your sort of really formative experiences were as a player, as a performer, was busking. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, what you learned from busking.
Well, I mean, it just came to a point where it was like, well, number one, I didn't have any grades. Number two, I mean, I didn't really have any money. I tried to get into some music schools, like to get scholarships, but that didn't happen. I probably could have hit up all of my relatives, but, you know, it just wasn't my thing, you know. I mean, I couldn't, like, figure out how to deal with an institution. I still can't. If a bill comes that's wrong, I have to have my wife deal with it because I can't handle it. But, so anyway, my friend who I went to high school with, he was French, and he said, I've got a place to live for a month in Paris. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I went there, and it was apartment, like a room, just one little room. And I stayed there for a month and met a lot of really amazing people on the subway and the street. And then I didn't have a place after a month. So I kind of stayed in the subway and on the street until I met other people. And the thing about busking is, you know, for me, I was just in my early 20s and really carefree. And you meet all these people from all over the world who are pretty seriously badass musicians. And so for me, it was on-the-job training, you know, and you're playing anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a day. Mostly people don't want to hear you. And in my case, I got into a group of people where I was the low man on the totem pole as far as guitar playing. So I had to play the acoustic bass that they had, which was plywood, and the action was like that high. So, you know, my hands turned into meat, and the cops would come. You'd have to run with the bass down the street. But it was great because you really learned you know, in retrospect, it was not a music school in terms of you didn't learn the pedagogy. You learned how to actually get out on the street and play music and make people stop and listen and put on a performance. And you played, like I said, at least 8 hours a day if you didn't get a gig at night from playing on the street. And so you were playing constantly. It just never ended. And it was, you know, it was rough and tumble, but I have to say, I feel privileged to have kind of stepped into that way of learning music, because it definitely I think it just informs the way that I play. And everyone else that I know that was a street musician, it's a special intensity or whatever you want to call it that we have that nobody else has. And all the people that I hear who have done that for a long period of time have it. I don't know if you know Madeleine Peyroux,
Sure.
who's kind of famous now. Well,
Yeah.
she was a street musician. She was in the other crew that I wasn't in. So we competed with them. I remember she was like 14 on the street singing. She's got it. I don't know if you know Tumongo, who's a fantastic tap dancer from New York. He has it. And I mean, I could just tell you all the different, and when you hear Edith Piaf, she's got it too. It's a special thing that you have, and you just can't get it in the school, you know.
Charlie, what were you playing? Was it like Beatles tunes, or what was?
That, I mean, anything but jazz. Because if you played, jazz was the thing you did in your spare time, if you had any, because it didn't make any money.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would stop. The second the vocals stopped, forget it. Nobody would stop. People would just keep walking by, walking by, walking by. You had some dance steps and some singing, even if it sounded terrible. You could get a whole crowd to stop. And we actually tried it in Zurich, Switzerland once, just to see what would happen. Me and 3 other people who were terrible singers, we did an a cappella pitch. It was the worst sounding, heinous, out of tune, caterwauling thing I'd ever heard. But since our rhythm, our time was so together, and we had the attitude that we knew what we were doing, and we were singing words, we got like 100 people stopped. And then we made more money that day than probably, it was unbelievable, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting to hear you talk about that you were playing bass, and I was wondering when you came back to the States, that's when you first got your first 7-string guitar. Is that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did the experience of playing the bass have any effect in sort of how you started hearing the music, or what you thought you wanted to do on the guitar?
Yeah, I guess so. I think at that time, yeah, you know, I realized that if it was just me and a singer, I'd made a lot more money. And I mean, by a lot more money, we're talking about, you know, I got to have 2 cappuccinos that day. You know what I mean? But it did make a difference. And so, you know, I just wanted to try something that was self-sufficient. And I played a lot of drums too. So there was the feeling of that counterpoint and how the time feels when the parts are playing together. And I was also really into, at that point, a local guy, Tuck Andrus, and Joe Pass, and those kinds of guys that were doing all these nifty, you know, contrapuntal stuff on the instrument. And then it just kind of took off from there, you know. At
what point did you go, I mean, because you've been back, you're still often described as an 8-string guitarist, but you're playing 7-string now, is that
Yeah, but it's different. I mean, the tuning has changed and it's evolved. And I mean, the 8-string thing was just like, you know, ooh, I want to have the bass and the guitar and play really complicated stuff and all these fast guitar lines, and boy, isn't that neat. And then, you know, finally I got to, you know, old enough, and I was just like, this isn't neat. This is really driving me nuts. What don't I like about this? And I realized the high guitar string was, you know, I wasn't that into it, and I took it off, and I was just like, wow, you know, without that string, I can get to all this different music. So and I've changed the tuning a bunch of times, and so right now I feel like the farther I get away from the concept of the bass and the guitar, and the more I get into what this thing is supposed to do, kind of the better the music is, and the more fun I have, you know.